for joining us this. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm very pleased to be joined by my colleagues on the City Council, most who could make it this evening as we speak with one voice. I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Angelique Ashby. I want to thank Vice Mayor Jeff Harris. I want to thank Councilmember Steve Hansen, Councilmember Eric Guetta, Councilmember Jay Schneer, Councilmember Rick Jennings, and Councilmember Larry Carr for joining me today. As mayor of our city, I have spoken at length these last days about the events, the recent events in our country and in our city. Tonight, my colleagues and I thought it would be very important to set out a succinct and clear statement from the actual governing body for the city of Sacramento, and that is the mayor and the city council. And so I want to, again, say what I'm about to say very succinctly, and then we'll open it up to questions. Number one, the city council condemns in the strongest terms the killing of George Floyd. We believe that the officers responsible should be prosecuted and brought to justice. Number two, we all agree that people have the right and, in fact, the duty to protest and to seek and demand change to what is broken in our society. Three, today we saw Sacramentans from all walks of life, mostly young people, coming downtown to help clean up the broken glass and the damage suffered by many of our small businesses. Some who came down this morning were peacefully protesting, were part of the peaceful part of the protest the day before. And it shows all of us here in Sacramento and throughout the country that you can demand change and love our small businesses and our city at the same time. Number four, the destruction that our downtown businesses and our city experienced last night is unacceptable. We will hold those responsible to account. We believe that a good number of the people who perpetrated the violence came from outside of Sacramento. Finally, number five, we know we pledge to the people of Sacramento that we are doing everything in our power, together with our city manager and with our police chief, to assure that tonight will be different. Mutual aid, the relationships we have between the city of Sacramento and our other neighboring law enforcement jurisdictions are ready and in place. We have never seen the kind of behavior we saw last night in the city of Sacramento. We do not intend to see a repeat of it tonight. Thank you. That is the statement that my colleagues wanted me to make as the mayor on behalf of them who are here tonight and our entire city. We'd be happy to open it up for questions.
Okay, everyone, just give me a moment to unmute you all. And then since I didn't have any questions preloaded in the queue, it would be helpful if you use the raise hand function so we're not all talking over each other here.
What's going on, Andrew?
Just slowly, I'm going down the list and unmuting everyone. Looks like everyone from the media is eligible, and Teresa Clift has her hand up. Teresa, go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks. Hi, Mayor. Will there be a curfew tonight in Sacramento?
We are not imposing a curfew tonight. Although we will reserve the ability and the right to call for a curfew if the behavior we saw last night continues. The reason is that we do not believe, based on the experience from other jurisdictions, that a curfew would necessarily be successful. because those who are committed to perpetrating looting and violence would probably ignore the curfew anyways. And so we reserve that ability, but not tonight.
Thank you. And what about the National Guard? Could they be called in tonight or in the future?
That is another potential, but no, we do not intend to call in the National Guard tonight. We believe that our police force, together with the mutual aid agreements that I mentioned a moment ago, give us the resources that we need with the lessons learned from yesterday and last night to be able to keep Sacramento safe.
I have Nick Miller up next.
Mayor, thanks for your time. There seems to be, I think we're in this place where we were in 2018, March of 2018, I think a familiar place for a lot of people on council and for yourself, where we're having a conversation as a community about the role of law enforcement in our community. I think there's been a lot of developments, as you know, since then, legislation, more trust, building bridges, but I just wanted to hear your headspace now and how we continue to have that conversation with our community and what role the mayor's office and city leadership has in creating a place to, continue that discussion with the community.
Well, I speak on my behalf because on this one, I don't want to presume that I speak on behalf of any of my colleagues who might say it differently. But for me, we bear the pain and the scars of having experienced this before. And I believe we have learned a lot and we have grown as a community. We have always had strong relationship and strong bonds between our community leadership and our elected leadership. And I think it's frankly what helped us get through the Stefan Clark situation, making the changes that needed to be changed while avoiding violence. Our work is never done. But when you look at what we all did together, I know for myself, I was one of the few mayors who came out publicly to support AB 392, which changes the use of force policy now in California and obviously in Sacramento. We have changed our protocols, we have changed our training, and most importantly, we are committed to an inclusive economic agenda in Sacramento to invest in all of our neighborhoods which have too far been left behind. This is all about hope. And it's about, it goes well beyond law enforcement and our communities of color and our disadvantaged communities. It is about hope. And this is a city of hope. We can take the headlines that the nation is in despair and we can choose our own path. We can choose that path of despairing, or we can choose a path of taking that which is most painful and trying to show the country that we can do it right. And that's what we intend to do between our police and our communities. Nothing is perfect, but we continue to build those bonds and we continue to make the changes that are necessary. And on the economic front, that is the essence of my mayorship, and I think our city's philosophy here. We are committed to inclusivity, and that's where my heart is at. We can choose our path. We choose the path of hope and redemption, and listening to the anguish and the pain that is genuine, and that makes up not just the experience of so many in Sacramento, but throughout the entire country.
Next up, I have Jonathan Iestis.
Jonathan, are you there? Maybe move to the next one, Andrew.
That looks like Teresa again. Go ahead, Teresa.
Hi again, Mayor, and council members. I was wondering if you could explain a little more the mutual aid agreements and whether there's anything different in place with those tonight versus from last night as far as the way that other law enforcement agencies will be helping out.
Well, remember, yesterday's protest started as a protest at and around the state capitol. And of course, as it got late into the day and as it got dark, it began splintering. And so we have mutual aid agreements, and they were implemented last night. They're going to be implemented at even a more significant level tonight as we learn from what occurred yesterday and take every extra precaution to make sure we don't see a repeat of the damage that occurred in many parts of our downtown last evening.
Excellent. I have Nick Miller with another question.
To follow up on those mutual aid agreements, you have CHP, you have Sacramento County, and there's been some reports from the Sacramento Bee and other media outlets that an 18-year-old young man was hit in the face in his jaw with a what's referred to by law enforcement as a less lethal use of force. Anyway, my question is, there's different agencies, different jurisdictions, all here in the city. How do we have a conversation about policy and use of force when there's different law enforcement agencies involved? And when we have a situation like last night where we have an 18-year-old who has a shattered jaw because they've been hit in the face with a projectile. Is that a conversation that needs to be part of the mutual aid agreements, or what kind of discussion can be had there?
I think it is a challenge, and I do know that the leaders of all our law enforcement agencies do talk about how to implement the mutual aid agreements. I hope that the 18-year-old is doing okay and was not hurt too seriously. I know that the city of Sacramento is the lead agency and will continue to be, but we could use the support when you have massive numbers of people that are coming to Sacramento, in part because it's the state capital. We cannot necessarily do it all alone when the numbers get too big. And so I know that the leaders are talking about protocols, and we just have to do our very best in a very difficult situation to try to keep everybody safe in Sacramento.
Next up is Doug Johnson.
Hey, Mayor and City Council, Doug with Fox 40. I just want to ask about folks. Should they be concerned going out tonight? Should they be concerned about leaving their businesses tonight? Is there going to be an officer that's going to respond if they call 911?
I know that there is a one-stop number for people to call. Maybe Steve Hansen, you could pipe in here that Captain Norm DeLong is going to be sort of the triage captain tonight, and that if any business has an issue, they can call right away. I would urge people, yes, to be careful tonight and to be cautious. We're going to open up Sacramento bigger and grander than ever before once we get through both the next stages of the COVID crisis and the crisis we are dealing with now. But for tonight, I would urge people to be cautious. Steve, you want to help with that one, please?
Thanks for the question. Thanks, Mayor. I would just say that the advice from our department and from our business associations is that businesses that are open in downtown and midtown should consider closing for tonight. Just given the fact that we are still working through the dynamics of this. The business associations are working closely with PD leadership, as the mayor said, to make sure that we can respond as effectively as possible. This is a very dynamic situation, and to the extent that the mutual aid resources are available, I think it gives us the chance to ensure that various businesses do have the resources they need. Last night, I would just add that the police department fielded calls from around the city at the time where some of the incidents were happening in downtown and midtown. And so they do have to cover the whole city. And so it will be something that we have to deal with on a dynamic basis.
Next up, I have Eric Escalante from ABC 10.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Obviously there is a lot of heartache right now after some of the damage that happened last night. And I think my question for you right now is, some of these businesses were probably just reopenings since the reopening of Sacramento County, and having this kind of hit against them. I got to wonder, is there going to be any kind of support or aid coming from the city of Sacramento for businesses that were impacted last night?
Well, on Tuesday, the city council voted to put forward $10 million in aid to our small businesses under the COVID context. But I will tell you, the businesses hit yesterday were also businesses that were suffering because of having to shut down for a lengthy period of time due to COVID. And so the timing in many ways could not be worse, given multiple traumas within a short period of time. But in another way, we are ready to intervene immediately because we do have that $89 million. And as I said yesterday, we are prepared to allocate the first 10 million of that on top of the 1.1 million that we allocated in the first weeks of the pandemic. And so we are not going to allow our small businesses to deal with these challenges alone. We stand ready as their partners, not just in spirit and in name, but we do have some real resources to be able to help out, and we will do so.
All right, next up is Teresa.
Mayor, you said this morning on Cap Radio that the police were sensitive about going in and doing mass arrests during some of the looting because they didn't want to cause serious injury or death. Is that strategy going to be the same tonight, or if we see looting happening, will police be intervening this time?
Well, I believe, without giving away any of their tactics, because that would not be appropriate, that the safety of the public and the safety of the police officers themselves are paramount, and they will remain paramount tonight. But I do believe that they will intervene even faster tonight because of the mutual aid agreements that will be elevated this evening and will allow them to be able to move faster. And so I think tonight will be different. I sure hope tonight will be different. Again, we'd never seen anything of the sort. The damage that we saw last night, we've never seen that before in the city of Sacramento. Even if you compare this to the Stephon Clark protests, this is worse. And I think it's probably worse in part. There are many reasons, obviously coming on the heels of this terrible COVID pandemic. The emotions of the entire country, of course, are on the rawest of edges. But I also think you can't ignore the fact that this is more sophisticated organizationally, that there are a lot of people, we are being told, who are coming from outside Sacramento, and I know your paper wrote about it just this afternoon, who are not part of the community leadership, who were rightfully angry about the death of Stephon Clark and who protested and who demanded change, but who love our community. I think there are a lot of people coming in who came in last night who don't know Sacramento. And so it is a very, very different, very different flavor. We have to deal with that. But I think tonight it is our hope, and certainly we are prepared to do everything we can to make sure that there isn't a repeat of the damage that occurred last evening.
All right, I got Nick Miller up next.
Mayor, just some quick clarifications. The number of agencies involved in the mutual aid agreement, is that still 8? And the recommendation for city businesses to close, is that an official city recommendation? Is that just for tonight only, or does that extend for additional days?
It is not an official city recommendation. I think, as Councilmember Hanson said, it is the advice of the business associations. I would probably describe it as the informal recommendation of the mayor and the city council. Because if we can show that not a repeat of last evening, then they will then be able to reopen quickly. We do not anticipate that this is going to have to last for days or even weeks, but it's one day at a time. And last night was obviously a very traumatic experience. And we want to make sure that the businesses and the people who live downtown take at least an extra night of additional caution to stay safe, to keep their property safe. We think that's the right thing to do. And of course, some businesses were just in the process of reopening anyway. Some had not even opened. I know Macy's, for example, was not intending to open until tomorrow. Now, obviously, they won't. But I will tell you, Sacramento is going to come back bigger and stronger than ever, including its downtown and its midtown. I'm confident of that, in part because of who we are, and because of what we saw today with so many people coming downtown to help with the cleanup, young people especially, because we have this financial assistance that will help advance the recovery, both from COVID and from what happened last night. And we are going to open bigger and better than ever.
And there are 10 organizations, according to the chief, involved in the mutual aid.
Next up is Eric Escalante.
1 second, just to follow up on Nick's question. Nick, the Midtown Association, while we're on this press conference, did put out a request to businesses in Midtown to close, to secure their properties, and to take other actions just that are preventative. As the mayor said, the Downtown Partnership has also done the same thing. I think that for many of the businesses, as you talked and I talked and other people talked to the owners today, their employees and them, they're just trying to figure out how to move through this and reopen eventually. So I know that the best part of today was seeing people come down to help clean up, starting at 6 a.m. and sometimes probably earlier. We saw people bring their dustpans and their brooms and trash bags and Windex and try to do what they can. I would say that to those 100 or so businesses that were affected last night with broken windows, looting and other things, that we should step up, and once we get through the immediate situation, try to help them. If you need a watch fixed, go to the watch repair guy on Merchant Alley. If you want to stop into 7-Eleven to buy something, please do. We have a lot of local businesses, women-owned, minority-owned, immigrant-owned, that are part of what make our downtown and midtown great, and they're the ones who seem to be hit the hardest last night.
I mean, I think it's worth reporting, if you will, and I know some have, about how this group of about 50 young people came together in the middle of the night when it was apparent what had happened, and agreed to come together at 5 o'clock this morning, many of them, as Steve said, with their own brooms and with their own equipment, and began cleaning up. I mean, that is, if I have a choice to decide which Sacramento, what version of Sacramento I want to invest in and believe in, and I look at the one night of destruction, which was terrible, versus that story that I just told, that Steve Hansen has just told, I know where I am investing my future. And man, that is the majority of the people in this city, without question, who have the same beliefs, the same spirit, even if they have different political beliefs. They love this city, and we're going to come back strong.
All right, next up is Eric. from ABC 10.
Thank you. So I know we've mentioned the coronavirus a couple times now, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask if with all these mass gatherings, all these protests, exactly how much is it a concern to you guys on the council that we may have to backtrack and lose some of the progress that we've made? Second part to that would be, would you encourage people who are part of these protests to get tested?
I would encourage everyone to get tested. And yes, it is a concern where people gathering in close proximity. I know a lot of people wearing masks. I know some of the organizers of the protests last night, the constructive participants and organizers were in fact wearing masks. We were about to enter into big mask debate this week in the city, and I think we're going to put that off for a little while because we are focused on, obviously, on what is in front of us. But yes, COVID has not gone away, and people should be cautious and careful at all times. And of course, people should get tested. More important, they should keep their physical distance even while protesting, and they should wear masks.
All right, next up is Jonathan Iestis from KCRA. Go ahead, Jonathan. Oh, sorry, that was my fault. I have to, that was on me. You go ahead, Jonathan. Sorry, that was on me.
Hi, can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Okay, hi. Okay, so I know you've already touched on this a bit, but for some of the businesses who've been closed for months, hit hard economically, some of them that have seen what happened last night, what message do you have for some of these business owners who might just be uncertain on what now? Do I open and risk someone looting my store, or do I just keep holding on and not make any money at this point? What is your message to those business owners that are in the dark?
First of all, this situation that we confronted last night is not going to go on indefinitely. Secondly, you are not alone. Your city stands with you and by you. And my colleagues and I have not yet decided on the exact criteria for how to distribute the $10 million of COVID relief for small businesses. But when we do, I am confident that we will all agree that those businesses that suffered from COVID and also have been victimized by last night's events should get high priority when it comes to direct financial assistance from the city.
All right. Next up is Brody Fernandez from KFBK.
Hi, Mayor Steinberg. Thanks for taking my question. Last night, I was in contact with CHP officials, and unfortunately, they informed me that one of their officers was injured and several CHP vehicles were damaged. And hopefully, like we've all reiterated, we don't see that type of behavior tonight. But at what point can Sacramentans expect a curfew to be issued? At what point do we have to get at? Hopefully we don't get there, but what point will that be?
Well, again, we would all be fine with the curfew, but we also want to listen to the professional advice of our law enforcement experts. And the concern with the curfew is it might have an unintended consequence. And the unintended consequence would be that those who would defy any legal order would also defy the curfew. And so not tonight, but we'll look at it again tomorrow depending on what happens tonight.
All right. I don't have any other hands raised, but so no questions in the queue at the moment.
Just hang on for 1 minute, okay? Because we may have a couple oops, the observer didn't get in somehow. I just want to make sure if they have any question, we're taking care of them. So just hang on 1 sec, okay?
Okay.
While we're doing that, if I could just come back to the question about the small businesses and what we tell them. I think what we tell them is what they saw themselves this morning, is that a lot of our community, and not just people who live in downtown or midtown or other places that were affected, but people came from all over to show that they loved those businesses, they cared about them, they wanted to support them. And I think that's going to continue to be the Sacramento way as those businesses and all the other ones who are just hoping to reopen and recover from the fallout of the COVID crisis. I think that we have to redouble our efforts to show our local businesses that they matter to us, that the entrepreneurs who step out and provide important services and help in our community are not going to be forgotten. And I think that's an opportunity, not just for the city, that's an opportunity for every part of the community to call, to shop, and to show their support. The employees who were displaced last night as well, whether it's Macy's, which is a large entity, or it's a small entity that was hit, and like Eyes on J, run by a woman optometrist. I think that we all have to do our part to make sure they can succeed despite what's going on right now.
Is Larry Lee on the line?
Yes, Larry Lee is here, and I have opened it up so he can talk. He just has to unmute himself if he'd like to ask his question.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Larry.
Hello, thank you. So what should protesters expect? And I apologize if you've already answered this question, but what should protesters expect from law enforcement when being confronted? Some folks have been getting hit with low impact bullets and causing great harm. Is that a directive from the police and the city council, or what? How should we respond?
Let me be clear. People should expect from their city and their police department respect for their constitutional right to protest and to assemble. And I believe, I'm going to defend our police department here, I believe that they have acted with great restraint and with great respect in dealing with the protests last night and the night before. Where the situation changes is when some protesters, not all of them and not even the majority of them, engage in conduct which is illegal, where they begin destroying property, because that then puts the protesters, the law enforcement officers at great risk, and it obviously causes destruction to people who have invested their life savings in building small businesses. And so at that point, law enforcement has the right to use legitimate means, and always to de-escalate, always to try to use the least invasive means possible to get people to disperse who are engaged in illegal activity. And that's the way it should be, because we won't stand for another night of people, whether they live in our city or outside of our city, trying to destroy our city. And that is not the opposite of cherishing the people's right to be heard in a peaceful way. And it isn't the opposite of calling out those Minneapolis police officers and saying that they should be prosecuted. It actually all fits together. It's called no violence, no destruction, nowhere, no how, at no time. That's what we believe here in the city of Sacramento.
All right, well, if there's not anybody else that's got a burning question, we've been doing this for a while now, so.
Let me conclude, if I might. Thank you. It's time to stand up for Sacramento. And I just want to thank my colleagues on the city council for doing just that, not just over the last days, but through all the days of your service. We are not perfect. We are continuing to learn, to grow, and to listen. But we are on the right track in this city. And we've had a couple of really hard blows, COVID, and now this. And so it's time to stand up for Sacramento. Let's pray that tonight is a safe night, that everyone remains safe, that people are heard, and that we wake up tomorrow morning with some better news. We will be in constant contact with you, the media, and the public as we work together through these very challenging times. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.